Well, a title change is reportedly in the works for Queen Consort Camilla, expected to take place once Charles is crowned king at his coronation.
Queen Camilla is making headlines once again. But this time, it wasn't because of a royal visit or a public event. It was because of what happened behind palace doors. As palace staff was making the final preparations for an important royal engagement, Camilla suddenly made a harsh remark to Princess Anne in front of everyone. The room fell completely silent. Every staff member froze, shocked by what they had just witnessed. However, what made it all worse was that King Charles was sitting right there, watching everything happen. And what he did next changed the balance inside the royal household forever. So how did Charles respond, and what does this mean for the monarchy? Let's dive in. The confrontation. It all happened back in early 2022. A private palace meeting was underway as senior staff prepared the final details for an important royal event. The room was quiet, and everything seemed to be going as planned. That is when Queen Camilla entered the room. She had expected it would be another routine meeting. The senior aides were still inside after the briefing because they needed final instructions for an upcoming royal engagement. Inside the palace, such events were never ordinary. They showed who carried responsibility, who gave direction, and who represented the crown when every detail mattered. King Charles was also sitting quietly with the revised schedule in front of him. He read the same page twice because even the smallest ceremonial change now carried real weight. He wanted the meeting to end peacefully. The royal family already faced enough pressure, and he hoped everyone shared the same goal. That is when Princess Anne entered the room with her usual calm and steady manner. Now, Anne didn't come to challenge anyone. She had noticed that the event order had been changed at the last minute. Princess Anne calmly raised concerns about the lack of attention to important ceremonial details in front of King Charles. Her voice remained calm and authoritative. Anne believed clear rules protected the monarchy from confusion and personal preference. Palace staff also trusted her judgment because she had earned their respect through years of discipline, service, and honest advice. Meanwhile, Camilla was listening to all this. To her, it sounded like Anne was questioning her authority by questioning her decision. It was a quiet reminder that many staff members still looked to the Princess Royal before their queen. As the meeting continued, silence slowly became heavier than conversation, and even the aides sensed the growing distance between the two women. Charles also noticed the growing tension in the room as both the princess and the queen exchanged uneasy looks. But what no one in that room knew was that it all had started long before the meeting ever began. The quiet humiliation. The quiet tension inside that meeting had not appeared overnight. Its roots stretched back to an earlier private rehearsal for an important state reception. Camilla arrived believing the new ceremonial arrangement finally reflected her position. She had approved a revised procession order that placed her preferred attendants closer to the front. To her, the change felt like long-awaited recognition after years of waiting to be fully accepted. But Anne noticed the change almost immediately. She carefully studied the procession order before calmly saying, why had experienced staff not reviewed the change before it received approval? She spoke without anger or pride. She simply explained that the adjustment broke accepted procedure and could create unnecessary confusion during the event. The room reacted before anyone said another word. The equerries and palace staff quietly accepted Anne's correction and immediately adjusted the order. No one argued, no one hesitated. Their quick response showed where years of trust had quietly taken root. King Charles later met Anne near the inner passage. He thanked her for preventing a protocol mistake before the reception could embarrass the crown. He saw her actions as careful judgment, not personal criticism. That private conversation never stayed private. A documented household account reached senior aides, and 2 staff members later mentioned the king's gratitude near the service stairs. Camilla overheard enough to understand exactly what had happened. She heard that Anne had earned Charles's praise. She heard that discipline had carried more weight than her decision. And from that moment, everything looked different. Anne no longer seemed like a loyal sister protecting royal tradition. Camilla slowly began to see her as someone whose quiet influence reached further than her own authority. Every careful correction now felt personal, even when Anne never intended it that way. By the time the household gathered again, weeks of silent resentment had already settled beneath the surface, waiting for one final moment to break into the open forever. Breaking royal order. Now, back inside that same palace meeting, the conversation resumed, but the calm inside the room had already disappeared. Camilla looked across the table at Princess Anne and decided she would no longer stay silent. Before King Charles could speak, she stepped in and took control of the conversation herself. Her first words sounded measured. Each sentence that followed became sharper. Camilla accused Anne of making her feel like an outsider inside her own household. She told Anne that she had spent years hiding judgment behind duty, making everyone else feel smaller while pretending to protect the crown. Nobody expected those words. The senior aides froze where they stood. The equerries avoided looking at either woman. Even Charles remained silent for a brief moment as he watched the argument unfold in front of the very people trusted to serve the crown. Anne never answered with anger. She stood exactly where she was and listened without interrupting. When Camilla finally stopped speaking, Anne calmly looked toward her and replied, "Duty is exactly what keeps the crown alive." Now the room fell completely still. Anne's quiet answer carried more weight than every accusation that came before it. She refused to defend herself, raise her voice, or turn the disagreement into a public fight. Her restraint only made Camilla's frustration more visible to everyone watching. That was the moment Charles reached his limit. He rose so quickly that his chair scraped across the floor, breaking the heavy silence. He ordered Camilla to stop immediately. His voice no longer sounded like a husband trying to calm his wife. It carried the authority of a king determined to protect the monarchy before its own staff. He looked around the room once before ordering everyone except Anne and Camilla to leave. The official meeting was over, but its consequences were only beginning. What had started as an ordinary planning session had ended in complete silence. The staff walked out without a single word, knowing they had witnessed far more than a family dispute. The doors closed quietly behind them, leaving Charles alone with a decision that would forever change the balance inside the royal household. Duty over love. Moments later, the household secretary placed a written incident summary on his desk. The report carefully recorded what every member of staff had seen and heard during official palace business. The words stayed formal, yet they carried enough weight to remind Charles that the confrontation had become more than a family dispute. He sat alone and read every line. Anne waited quietly in another room. She did not ask for an apology or defend herself through palace aides. In her mind, her responsibility had ended the moment she protected royal duty. Charles understood both women. He knew Camilla wanted acceptance after years of standing beside him. He also knew Anne had spent her life protecting the traditions that held the monarchy together. For the first time, those two loyalties stood against each other, and only one could guide his decision. Charles quietly removed Camilla from the final ceremonial planning process and instructed the household secretary that Anne would oversee the official order instead. Inside the palace, that decision meant far more than changing names on a document. It showed every member of staff that trust still belonged to the person who protected the crown above personal feelings. Camilla soon received the revised briefing sheet. She read it once. Then she read it again. Her name was gone, and Anne's had taken its place. Charles had not chosen comfort. He had chosen responsibility. For Camilla, that quiet decision spoke louder than any argument inside the meeting room ever could. Later, Charles met Camilla in private and explained that he had not acted against his wife. He had acted for the monarchy. She listened without interrupting because she finally understood what had been lost. The palace slowly returned to its routine, yet everyone remembered the lesson that remained. Titles could command attention, but only steady characters could earn lasting respect. In the end, King Charles faced the toughest choice any leader could make. He protected the crown, even when it hurt those closest to him. Princess Anne kept her dignity, while Camilla faced the cost of losing control. So, after hearing all this, What do you think? Did Charles make the right decision by choosing duty over family? Or should he have stood beside Camilla instead? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this video fascinating, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Also, consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already, because we'll be uploading more incredible stories like this one in the coming weeks. Until then, see ya!